Okay, what I'm going to do here is create a falling car and show how how we can build an assembly to make that all work well. So we'll start off with a chassis and some wheels. I use some cylinders for wheels, and I'm going to turn on my edged faces so I can see how many segments I've got, because I don't need that many segments. And for this, looks good. Okay, there's my wheel. There's my first wheel. I'm just going to move it over. And this is going to have to change a little bit in its scale. Let's just do like that. And move this over until it's just on the side of the chassis. And I'll go ahead and get in here and turn off my grids with the G key so you can see this better. Okay. And I'm going to change some colors here so you can see this better against the screen. Go with a lighter color here. And I imagine you can see that, but let's just make sure. Okay. So here's one of my wheels, and I need a few of those, so let's copy them. Give them a little bit of room here, and Shift Move does my copy for me, and then take both of these guys using my Control key, and then Shift Move to make my last set of wheels. Okay, there's my chassis. Now I need a car body. I'll use a box, and I'll use AutoGrid so I can draw it on top of the other box. Okay, now this is not going to be a real fancy body, but it'll work. And let's go with this kind of a design, and we'll go ahead and convert this thing to an editable poly so that I can make it look more like a car. And so I'll bevel this up. Looks good. Just to make it look a little bit more like a car, I'm going to go into Vertex Subobject mode and drag some of these around a little bit, because most cars do have a little bit of an angle here. But I'm not going to get carried away, because this is more about the animation and the hierarchy of this thing. So, and I also want to make this just a little bit bigger. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is create an assembly here, in a sense. I'm going to, probably easiest to do it in this view, I'm going to maximize this top view. And I'm going to make the children, the wheels, children of the chassis. Let me go ahead and name these so you can see what these are. So we'll call this chassis. We'll call this one, this wheel, left front. We'll call this left rear, and right front, and right rear. Okay, and we'll put this right there. Oh, before I do that, let me just show you so it'll be clearer here. I'm going to change my color so you can see these very clearly also. I'm going to go to Select and Link on the left side here. I'm going to link this child to the chassis. So it's child, parent. Let's do it again. We'll select and link child to parent. Notice I'm grabbing where I get a clear shot at the child and a clear shot at the parent. And I'm doing this 4 times. Let's look at the hierarchy here, or the schematic view. And let's close this, and you can see there's chassis and there's my wheels. And then we have a boxer that's not connected yet. Let's go ahead and connect that. So I'll go back to my select. I'll grab this. We'll call this body. And I'm going to move the body into the proper position. and I'm going to do a select and link and grab the body and drop it right on the chassis. See how I can get this nice blue edge there? That's the chassis. If I couldn't have done that, let me go to select and link. Let's go to select. I could have got it from this view here. I could have done the body here and linked it to the chassis here. The bottom line is this. The chassis is the parent of this assembly. If I move the body, it's independent. Okay. So now we're going to drop this thing from a height. So to drop it, we better have something to drop it on. So let's just build a little platform for this thing. Here's what we're going to drop it on, and let's move the chassis up off the ground, a couple meters, let's say. Okay, and I'm going to do the rest of this from the front view, and I might as well shade it so you can see it better. And say I want to see edged faces. Okay, so this is going to be ground, and why don't I just call it ground? Okay, and we're going to drop the chassis on this thing. So let's go ahead and turn on auto key, and we'll drop it, let's say, let me just nudge it here at frame 20. Okay, so it really hasn't moved much, okay? Just a little bit, and we can refine that if we want to. So starting at frame 20, it's going to drop. I want it to drop over a period of, let's say, 10 frames. So I'm going to drop it down, and I'm just going to touch the wheels. Now I could stretch the wheels or squash the wheels and all that, but I don't want to get into that right now. So this is dropping, but let's play it and see what happens. Okay, it doesn't drop fast enough, so I'm going to right-click it on the chassis, right-click, curve editor, and I'm going to say this little edge this little point right here. Let's talk about this for a second. Notice that if we open this up, we've got chassis, we've got a transform, it's a position transform for X, Y, and Z. Red, green, and blue. X, Y, and Z would connote to red, green, and blue. So you can see that the Z is the one that's changing. The red and the green aren't moving at all. Okay, so if I look over here, there's the blue, there's the Z, so I am moving in the Z. It's dropping down from this height, see? So it makes sense. Now, the thing is, this drop doesn't look quite right. So if I select this keyframe and I drag this little tool up, maybe I can zoom in on that a little bit for you to see that. There's the curve. And what I've done, I'm going to go to this little move tool here, and I can adjust this so that it's a nice vertical drop. And if I wanted to, I can also gradually ease into that drop. And you can see where I did that little bit of a nudge, how that threw everything off a little bit. So let's fix that too. So I'm done with this. I've got the nudge thing, but here's what I'm going to do about that nudge. I'm going to get rid of that frame 20. I'm just going to delete it. I'm going to take frame 0 and hold down my shift key and just copy it to frame 20. So now I have an absolute still vehicle at frame 20 and drops suddenly from 20 to 30. Let's play it. Okay. Now I could bounce it. I could bounce the chassis, but I don't want to get into that right now. What I want to do instead is on frame 35 or frame 30, I want to go ahead and nudge the body. Okay, so I'm going to nudge it down, nudge it back up. Then at frame 35, I'm going to go ahead and bring the body down because the shocks are collapsing. The vehicle's dropping, the body is dropping past the chassis right now. That's how shocks are going to work on a car. And let's go ahead and exaggerate it since this is animation. Then on frame 39, I'm going to say, well, come on back up and go up too high. You know, go ahead and exaggerate it a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and bring it back down. A little bit less this time. And finally back up. And notice I'm going fewer and fewer frames each time. And let's go ahead and play that. And see what we got. Okay, so that's our, we could call it secondary motion, because we have our main body, which is the chassis moving, and the body of the car moving in response to what the chassis did when it dropped. Okay, so that's how we would do that. Okay, now I want to do something else with this, a little bit more complicated. I'm going to turn off auto key for a minute, and we've got some animation here. But what I want to do now is break something off of this car. Back on frame, back when it first started, I want to make a little trunk on this thing that flips open when it falls. So I'm going to select the car. It is an editable poly already, so I'm going to pick this face here and I'm going to detach it. And I'll call that trunk because it's got, let's say, a broken trunk. And I'm not going to detach it to an element or detach as a clone. I'm just going to detach it. So it's detached now. Now I can get out of subobject mode and select it and see if I can feel around and find it. And there it is. And I can just prove that this is detached there. But I don't want to pull it off yet. What I want to do is go ahead and extrude it. So it's selected. I'm going to do a face extrude. And now I'll extrude it just that much so we can see a thickness to that thing. And I'm also going to change the color of it to something that we can see is actually different. Now I'm also going to go to my top view and change the hinge point on that thing. So it's all selected, and you can see, actually I should give you a better view of this, you can see where the pivot point is. If I go to hierarchy, my third button over, and affect pivot point, you can see the pivot point for this is still the center of the car. In fact, it's the bottom middle of the box we started our development with. Well, what I'm going to do is move that. So I'm going to go to my top view, and for the trunk we're going to move the pivot point to, let's get nice and close to get this accurate, right at that edge. And from the front view, and I just did F for front for a quick key, I'm going to move that pivot point to right here, because this is, if it was a hinge, where the hinge would be. If I want this thing to flip open, that's where I want the pivot point to be. And now I'll turn off affect pivot only, because otherwise I might screw up some things later. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to go back to a shaded view, and I want to see my edges. And here it is up in the air, and it still drops just like we expect, but the trunk itself isn't dropping. So let's deal with that. And we could have animated this differently, but well, one thing we need to do is make this trunk a child of the car body. So I'm going to go to select and link and grab the trunk. Let's actually just call it trunk too. Did we? Yeah, it's called trunk. So we're going to go select and link, press, drag, and release right onto the car body. Okay. So now when it drops, it follows the car, which is great. But we want to animate it too. We want to add some more secondary motion to this animation. So I'm going to go to select, I'm going to grab that trunk lid, I'm going to turn on auto key, I'm going to go down, and right at frame 20 is where I want to nudge this thing. Now I'm going to nudge it with a rotate, and I'm going to turn on my angle snap toggle so that when I rotate this, it'll rotate exactly 5 degrees and then back 5 degrees. And that's my nudge. That gives me a keyframe at frame 20 that is the same as it is at frame 0, which means, yeah, I've rotated this thing, and it's kind of telling it, do not rotate until starting on frame 20. So let's go ahead and do the next one. We get to frame 30, it hits the ground. That's where I'm going to have it fly open. Okay, so watch what it does. Starting at frame 20, it drops. Okay, and now I'm going to have it, as it hits, I'm going to have it slam shut again. And as it comes up, I'm going to do it in the timing of the car body, even though I don't have to. I'm going to have it go up again, and as it goes down again, as it bottoms out, I'm going to have it slam again. Actually, I think I could delay that. I think it might be better to delay that. So we hit Let's just watch it for a second. Okay, I think it's going to come down. I think I'm going to have it slam down just after it actually bottoms out. Right here. I'm going to get rid of these keyframes for a minute. So I can select those keyframes and delete them. And I want this to actually happen. This, I'm going to slide this keyframe over and have it happen just a little bit later. So it bottoms out and then it slams shut. And that's a little bit better secondary motion, I think. I'm going to have it go up, back up a little bit after it has already maxed out its height. So I'm delaying this a little bit. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, not too bad. And so it came down, it comes up. And I'm going to have it come up just after, let's see, down, up, down. I'm going to have it come down just after the car went down. And then the car goes up again and stays up. And that's where I might just have this thing very quickly come up just a little bit and then down quickly. And we'll just try it out. Not too bad. I could live with that. And we could, if we wanted to, have this, let's see, I think it would probably come up pretty fast. Depends on if it slams against the wall or not. So we may want to right click this and go to the curve editor and change these curves. But for now I'm not going to worry about that. That's more something that's dropping, and I don't think we need to get into that for the trunk movement. But if we wanted to, we would change these keys, and I would use my shift to make these independent. See, and let's just see what that does. So you can see that first acceleration and deceleration, just like a bouncing ball. Okay, that's something we'd have to play with and decide if we really wanted it or not. Okay, that's about it. So we got a dropping car with secondary motion on the car suspension and secondary motion on the trunk.